Welcome back to the channel, and I know this video is long overdue since I said I was going to make a Q&A for the Integra Type S, so I'm just going to jump right into it. So thank you so much for sending all your questions and for all the comments that I've received on that specific video, which you can watch here in the link up there if you haven't yet. But we're just going to jump right into it and start with this question. Curious on what you think of the lack of a rear wiper, especially in the rain. Well, it hardly rains here in Southern California, but it actually did rain a few weeks ago, and I honestly didn't mind that it didn't have a wiper, only because the back window, it's not as vertical as a hatchback, a traditional hatchback or an SUV, so it just seems like a regular sedan to me, so it doesn't matter. How tall are you and your partner? Does having the child seats affect your front legroom? Well, I'm not tall. I'm only 5'5", and my wife is about 5'2", 5'3", so doesn't affect us at all. But we also have front-facing car seats. That will take up less space than rear-facing car seats. My kids in the back have adequate room. Fit and finish is a big deal that shouldn't be overlooked and shrugged off. I agree. And that's why we have companies such as Tesla, who is having a wonderful time right now. But this whole thing isn't new, to be honest. Like, even old companies such as Ford have had issues like this. So it's not necessarily new, but I agree. I've owned all the generations of Integra, so glad they brought it back, but the price is a non-starter. How can anyone look at this without thinking Supra or M2? It would be different if it had a fine V or inline 6, but it has the same modern vacuum cleaner overboosted 4 to help you forget it is an $8,000 engine. They pump fake sound into it and make the exhaust do the fake backfires. So there's a lot in this comment, but I'll address it one by one. I was shopping for the Supra as I was considering the Integra Type S. And the funny thing about the Supra is that there was an 18-month wait list for the manual version, and the dealers wouldn't even entertain me unless I had at least $10,000 on top of the MSRP. At least. So that was a non-starter for me. The second is M2 is a great car, but it just never resonated with me, and I really just didn't want a BMW. And as for the sound of the 4-cylinder, I think it sounds good. You could also argue that if you had a V6, it doesn't sound like a V8. So I think that argument is kind of moot. As for the backfires, I also like the sound. As a matter of fact, as far back as, I don't know, early 2000s, Audi has been doing this with the RS6, the fake backfire sounds, if that's what you call it. Great car. How is traction out of slow corners with the front wheel drive? I wish I could answer you with a more technical answer, but I don't track the car. I don't think I've ever driven it hard enough to have a meaningful, I guess, insight regarding this. But the car just handles really well, and not once have I ever felt that it was losing traction around corners. I know that's probably not the answer that you're looking for, but that's the best that I can give. Should I lease this car? That's definitely a question that you should be asking yourself based on your needs, your financial situation, and your life in general. I can't answer that for you. You learn that at the end of the day, it's still a Honda. Yeah, it never was masquerading as anything else. And you say it like it's a bad thing. It's not. It's not worth the $60,000 price tag most dealers are charging. For 60 to 65K, there are far better options. And if you want a small sporty hatch, you can save 30 grand and get a GR Corolla. And with the savings, you can upgrade it to the moon and add any aftermarket comfort you want. I have an FK8 and wanted to get the new Type S, but I refused to pay 60 grand for a front-wheel drive 4-cylinder. Instead, I was able to save 30 and get a Ford Focus RS, which is a very rare car with a fully built motor and transmission and all-wheel drive. I wanted to get the GR Corolla, but the wait time is like 3 to 4 months. You're right. The wait for the Corolla is just insane. But I also don't want the Corolla. Even if I save 30 grand, I don't think I can make the Corolla feel any more comfortable or luxurious. Again, it goes back to the fact that I didn't want the Corolla. There's always this argument between front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. I've been around long enough to know why that's the case. But if you've driven newer front-wheel drive cars, which I know you have since you said that you have the FK8, you will have to agree that front-wheel drive cars are actually really good now. I've owned 3 all-wheel drive vehicles, 2 rear-wheel drives, and 2 or 3 front-wheel drive cars. They all have their own different characters. I think the argument that one is better than the other is irrelevant at this point. But the price, though, I agree. Some people have a hard time swallowing the price tag, and that's totally fair. But because I was shopping for the Supra, that one is a lot more expensive. So we can do our best to quantify what we get per dollar. But I think at the end of the day, you buy the car that you really like. I see you have car seats in yours. I'll have two rear facing ones. How would you say rear space is with the car seats? So this is actually a problem with rear facing car seats because it will take up more room than front facing car seats. The same was with my WRX. I thought it would have enough room, but because I had rear facing car seats back then, it really did push me forward, and I'm a short guy. So I feel like for the Integra Type S, it's going to be the same, unfortunately. Interior is okay for a $30,000 car, downright cheap and rattle filled for 50K. Now, this kind of boggles my mind because unless you drive new cars every year, maybe then you'll say that, yeah, this $50,000 car shouldn't feel like this. But ever since I sat inside the Integra, it's never crossed my mind that this feels like a cheap car. There are cheap plastics in the car, don't get me wrong, but the overall feeling doesn't feel cheap to me. As a matter of fact, it's funny because if you flip that, you sit inside a Civic and you're like, well, this is actually nicer than a $30,000 car, for example. And as far as the rattles go, I think the tire noise is much more annoying. I haven't really noticed any rattles, to be honest with you. Maybe I'm just not paying attention, or maybe that thing just doesn't bother me. Nothing old school about it. You mean like the manual transmission? It feels old school to me. I can't get over the fact that it's an economy car dressed up as a luxury car. An economy car can be a sports car, but it can't become a luxury car. When I'm at the track, I marvel at the people who turn their Dodge Neon or regular Civic into a stock car. But when I see someone turn an economy car to a luxury car, it makes me cringe. Well, lucky for you, because this isn't a luxury car. It's just a more luxurious sports car compared to the Civic. And that's because of the extra features and the extra, I guess, use of materials inside. But by no means is this a luxury car. It is nice though, and it feels very sporty. So if you view it as a nicer sports car, then yeah, it checks out. My friend just bought an Integra Type S. There is a sound that sounds like a thin metal tab touching some rotation metal mass. Does this happen to your demo as well? My car isn't a demo, and no, I've not noticed any of that sound. So I would say take it back to the dealer. What were you cross shopping at the time, and why'd you pick this versus the others? Also, what was your daily driver before this? Great question. So I was shopping between the CT4V Blackwing, the Supra, and the Integra. The CT4 Blackwing just felt really old from a design perspective. Interior is just really old. The exterior was okay. I was forcing myself to like it because of the performance. And this is one of those things that if I were to explain why I bought the Blackwing, I would always have to say, oh, because it's the fastest one. So I didn't want to do that. It just didn't resonate with me. Also, it was a lot more expensive, and that's not even including the markup. The Supra, I really, really loved the Supra, but it only had 2 seats. And also, the wait time was long, and there was also a markup. But I think one of the things that really drove me away from the Supra is I couldn't get to grips with the way it looked from the front. I mean, I think it's one of those things that kind of grew on me, but it's the same feeling that I got when I first got my WRX. It was like I was kind of convincing myself that I liked it, and I only liked it from certain angles. And that's definitely not the case for the Integra. I love this car from every angle. As for the daily driver, I drive a 2015 Forester XT and a 2020 Kia Telluride. Prior to the Telluride, I had a 2016 WRX. Thanks for sharing your Integra experience and offering to answer questions. I'm curious if you could share your thoughts on badging. I'm considering getting the blackout badging. Also interested in any thoughts you have about the optional front illuminated Acura badge. So the badging is definitely a personal preference, but I think that you can't go wrong if you don't go with the black badging, because I've seen pictures of other Integras. And as a matter of fact, even for mine, when I first got it, it still had the stock badges. And I thought it looked good because it stood out enough. If you like the stealth look, then definitely get the black badge. I will say, though, that I've seen the performance red Integra Type S with the black badging. I think that looks really, really nice. As far as the illuminated A mark goes, I originally wanted it, but I saw pictures and I just didn't like how the LEDs looked around it. It looked like Christmas lights to me. And so I decided, hey, instead of paying so much for that, why not just get the blacked out version and it looks fine. So that's really the only reason. And for the final and most asked question is, how much did you pay over MSRP? How much was it marked up? So there's a few reasons why I don't answer questions like this in the comments. The first one being is I think it's just a little bit rude to ask someone how much they paid for something. Now I get it. I get why people ask for how much they paid because you have the intention of getting as good of a deal, if not better. But no matter what any YouTuber tells you, no matter what I say, it's not going to sway the dealership or whoever it is that you're working with because it really boils down to you. So my advice, call the dealerships around you. Call the ones that are in your area where you are able to purchase it. Don't ask random YouTubers if how much they paid because that's completely irrelevant. And the next one is if I answer questions like this in the comments, then the conversation turns from how is the car to how much you paid and why you paid that much, right? It's just a weird subject to me. I'm not going to walk up to you and be like, how much did you pay for your shoes or your suit or your house? That's just rude. It doesn't apply to me. It doesn't matter. So I just think it's one of those things that people should stop asking. But I am going to answer this question. And as a matter of fact, when I was shopping for the Integra Type S, I was fully honest about this in the forums. You can check it out. Integra forums said how much I paid. So this particular dealer that I worked with charged a $7,500 markup for the Integra. And believe it or not, they are the lowest that I could find here in California. Now, someone would say, why don't you, buy out of state? Travel expense. I would have to take a few days off. And that means I'm not working. That means I'm not getting paid. And then I would have to think about my kids. Like, who's going to take care of my kids? There's just so many moving parts for me to actually consider buying out of state, unless it's a car that's super rare and it just like one of those things that this is a unicorn, right? So I decided to buy something that's convenient for me. And there is a markup because supply and demand. And that's a completely different topic that we don't have to get into. But also, I managed to work in the accessories that I like into that 7,500, which essentially turned it into a $5,000 markup on top of the MSRP. Would I have preferred to pay the markup? Of course not. No one does, right? And this is one of the things that I talked to my friend about. And he's like, why are you going to pay the markup for a car like this? Yeah, I can wait for the market to cool down, but I'm in a phase in my life where I'm ready to buy a car. It's not like I buy cars every year. So I'm ready to buy a car right now. And I mean, things could happen. I mean, I could be doing something else by next year. So I made that decision for myself. I'm not saying you guys should do the same thing, but I feel like this is a conversation that will always deter people from actually making decisions because some random guy on the internet said, don't do that. And that's basically it. So thank you for watching this video and thank you for sending your questions. Again, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. I have more content that I have planned. I actually just came back from San Jose for a special preview that I can't really talk about yet, but it's very exciting. And I got to drive two really interesting cars. More to come. So thank you for watching and I'll catch you guys again very soon.